All right. How you doing?
Doing okay. How are you?
Good. So the first, are you in the thick of it as far as like the hearings go in October? Because I know you were saying you had a ridiculous amount of hearings in October.
I am in the thick of
Yeah.
it.
Has
Yeah.
it been the past week? Just a
Yeah.
bloodbath?
Basically a bloodbath. That's the right
I,
word.
I know you've had
Some really good ones.
yeah, I know you've had a couple bad experiences with the hearings. So why don't you tell us what's going on?
Yeah, it seems, in the 21 years that I've been doing this, things are pretty much always the same, and sometimes you have some common problems that seem to crop up, and they seem to be things that you just have to deal with, and then they fade away. And I'm hoping that that's what's going on now because right now, our biggest, um, it's a problem. The biggest snag that we find when we're in the thick of it, we're either about to have the hearing or we're in the hearing, and earnings that we had no idea were there crop up. They're not in the case record, or they haven't been reported the same way to us earlier, then they're now being reported to the judge. That's happened uh, a couple times recently. Um, we were told, yeah, I'm still working, but I'm barely putting in any hours, and Check Steps had verified that. That was like earlier this year, and what we find out is later this year, they're they're going for it.
Full-time employment?
Full-time employment, way over the SGA, substantial gainful activity limit. I mean, quadruple over the limit. Not an argument that I can make. There's no argument that I can make. And in discussing it um, with one of my clients about it, he just defaulted on, I had to do something.
Classic.
And I have told people over and over again, if you ever go into a hearing and the judge asks you, well, I see that you were out of work for a bit, but it looks like you've returned to work and you're now over the limit. What changed? Because what the judge is asking, did your health improve? Did you
Yeah.
get in some kind of treatment? Was some medication all of a sudden miraculously helping you? Stuff like that. I never get that answer. We always get, I had to do something. And then what happens is when everything is over, all the dust is cleared, you're no longer in a formal setting. My client usually will call me livid, absolutely livid, that the judge doesn't think he's disabled. And we'll go through a 30-minute conversation where I'm trying to explain you're never even going to get a medical consideration. You're never going to get that far. You're working. And that is the first
Yep.
measure that they go by. Are you working over the limit? If the answer is yes, they never look at anything else. We talked about this in another podcast. If you are terminally ill, your doctor has said you won't make it till Christmas. Let's say you have, Lou Gehrig's disease. You have cancer that's metastasized from the brain to the lungs. You have, your days are numbered, but you're still working over the limit. They will never even order those medical records. They can't find you disabled. And the problem that we have, like I said, when the dust clears and I'm talking to my client about it in an informal setting, we're just on the phone chatting, and they're furious, absolutely furious that the judge, is not going to consider their limitations, their medical condition. And let me just look into the camera. It will never happen. You will never get the judge to look at your medical conditions if you are working over the limit. I can't say it any meaner or plainer than that.
It just, yeah.
It's just
Terminally ill,
Yeah,
wheelchair bound, doesn't matter.
yeah, you're not even going to get a medical consideration because you are gainfully employed. To be disabled means that you are not gainfully employed, and you can't be gainfully employed because of your condition. It, I think a lot of people in a lot of the firms, a lot of my colleagues / competitors, they have done a disservice to the disabled in basically putting out there that you can work and receive disability. Yeah, well, you can technically, but you can't work full time and draw disability ever, never,
Yeah.
ever. And not only that, once again, you won't even get the consideration you think you're due. Well, if they look and they see how bad my back pain is, then they'll understand how hard it is for me to work the 53 hours a week that I'm working, pushing myself to provide for my family. Okay, I get that. You're trying to provide for your family. They'll never get to the medical considerations because they can't. The law does not allow them to.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll get a technical denial before, if they can find the earnings, right? Before you even make it to the first medical review, you apply for benefits, and then a couple weeks or a month later, they deny you because of your earnings. But sometimes, like in the couple of cases you've had, it might be 18 months after you applied or 2
Right.
years after you applied, and then you have the hearing, and it turns out that you just wasted your time and you wasted your representative's time.
Yeah.
Because there's a 0% chance they could ever approve you because of the earnings.
Right. The other case, you're exactly right. The other case that it was the same week. I'm like, what did I do to deserve this week? But the same week, and my client, who is an absolutely charming young lady, she had been out of work. We took the case, and she went back to work, and she worked a couple months, and we've talked about that, the unsuccessful work attempt, the
Yeah.
UWA. And so we were good to go. Everything's clean. And then, I called her to prep her for the hearing, and she had watched my hearing prep video, and she said, "Listen, I got to tell you that, I've had some earnings." I said, "Yeah, well, you told us that you went back to the 3 months." She goes, "Well, after I went back to the 3 months, and then I was off for a couple months, I went back again." Well, how much did you make when you went back? And it was a boatload of money. And I'm
Full-time
like,
employment.
I'm like, well, she says, but I've been out now for about 3 months. I'm like, so if I go back to when you said you became disabled, and when we actually told Social Security you became disabled, and you were out, but then you went back for a few months, but then you were out again, and we thought you were out until now, which you went back to work again. Then there's the definition of disability that I hit her with. And to her credit, she was not mean. She was not livid. She didn't want to argue with me. She knew that, yeah, okay, now that you've explained it to me, I understand that I don't meet the rules. And the rule of disability is that you have an impairment that has lasted 12 consecutive months or is expected to last 12 consecutive months. In her case, she hadn't been out of work for any 12-month period in like the last 3 years.
Yeah.
She was doing this and doing that, and then she would work long enough that you couldn't call it a UWA. You couldn't call it an unsuccessful work attempt because it was like 7 months or 8 months.
So successful.
Yeah, you actually went back to work. So that one was another,
Did you have the hearing?
no, fortunately. That was a prep that we caught that in.
Right.
But it's like,
Well, that's better than going through with the hearing and then you learn about the earnings because of the testimony, and you're just sitting there like,
what?
what am I doing here then?
Yeah. Yeah, and I hesitate saying this because any people out there who don't have the ethics, might exploit this. But this is why we don't find out about these things until the hearing. A lot of people are like, well, you should have known about that. You should have gotten those Social Security records because Social Security runs those earnings queries, don't they? They certainly do. Yes, they do. And I am absolutely faithful about, jumping in there and looking at them as early on in the process as I can. But earnings themselves are reported after they happen. So, and usually, 6 to 8 months after they happen. So if you go to work in March, you're not going to have earnings showing up in your earnings records for March. About 2 quarters after that, which would be probably September, October, then you're going to show some earnings in the first quarter of whatever year it is for March. And then if you go a little bit further on, you'll find out that they've posted more earnings.
Yeah.
And so when you find out about them, it's always going to be half a year at least later than you actually had them. And I'm baffled why my clients don't tell me. When you're a client or a claimant and you sign up for disability, you have to attest to something. And one of the things that you're attesting to is, I promise that if I go to work, I will notify Social Security. Okay, well, you signed that. You signed that you promise that you will tell Social Security if you go back to work.
Yeah, and it's not a pinky promise.
That's it's you've attested to it. Your signature is on this form.
Right.
When you sign with us, you will, you enter into a contract with us in which you will tell us if you have any kinds of changes, and you will tell us those things immediately, especially if they pertain to your disability claim. You move, you got a new phone, you got a new doctor, you started a new medication, you've gone to work.
Yeah.
That's just, you have promised to tell us that. Doesn't mean that you started on Monday and so Monday evening you called us, but it does mean that you tell us, tell us that week, hey, I've just landed a job, what should I do? And we'll tell you the truth. Hey, go for it.
Yeah.
And see if it works out. But you gotta call us in a couple, 3 months to let us know it worked out and I'm gainfully employed now. I've basically returned to the workforce, or it just didn't work out. And like we've said in other podcasts, if it doesn't work out, I can use that, when I argue for disability. People who are disabled try to work, they fail at it usually.
Yeah.
People who are disabled, they're able to do some things. They can't do them very quickly, and they can't do them thoroughly. And in a job, if you don't do things at a certain pace or you don't do things thoroughly, eventually your boss is going to let you go. And that is indicative of disability. And I can make that argument to Social Security.
Right.
I cannot make an argument, well, I know the record says that they made $45,000 this year, but my client's saying that he really didn't make $45,000 this year. He says he did, but he did. Well,
there's no argument.
I'm tongue-tied. I can't make an argument like that. Well, he made the $45,000, Your Honor, but he had to do something because he's got a family to support. Okay, well, that's not disability. That's going through some hard times. That's having some health issues, but working through it.
Which is a valid opinion to have. Like, you can totally hold that opinion and it can be even justified.
Sure.
But when you're talking about the laws of a government agency, you can't get around that. That's just, like you said, that's the first thing they look at, is if you're working. Do you think, so most of these clients that they fail to tell us that they're working until it's too late, do you think most of them are just ignorant to how that works, and they're under the impression that they actually do qualify and my representative is just going to have to make a good argument on it? Or do you think there actually is some malice there to where it's like, I don't want to tell them because then I don't qualify, so I want to see if I can just leave that part out and maybe Social Security won't see it?
I think there's a little bit of all that. We've talked about it briefly in one of our other podcasts about that I will not be party to fraud. If you're planning on working under the table or you're planning on going to work, but I'm not going to tell Social Security. Yeah. Well, you just told me, and therefore if they ever asked me about it or I ever presented your case, I'd have to tell, because I am bound by that. It's in our contract, by the way. I've got to tell Social Security things that pertain to your Social Security disability claim, even if they're going to be damaging to your claim. That's a law that they made. I don't love it, but then again, I don't make the rules. So we don't see a lot of those because we kind of cull that from the herd, early on. And Mr. Smith, I can't help you with your case. I cannot help you with your case. You're welcome to call another representative firm, and good luck to you. Yeah, I would just get rid of that. So we don't see a lot of they're willfully trying to deceive either us or Social Security. We don't see a lot of that. It's basically the first thing you said. They're kind of ignorant of the process, but also, and I don't think this is anybody's fault. I think it's just kind of human nature. If they really do have a horrible impairment, have back problems, they're going to work every day, but they're literally, instead of waking up at 7 to make it to work at 8, they're waking up at 5:30 because they can't get their body going unless they work it out for an hour and a half before they jump in their car and go to work, and then struggle all day long, sitting down or doing whatever they're doing. And I think it's human nature to say, hey, if I tell a decision maker, how bad it is for me, they're going to look past the fact that I'm working.
Yeah.
And they can't look past the fact. That's the problem. And so, that's the argument. The first guy that we were talking about, he wanted to argue with me. Well, I've got this and I've got that, and I had to do something, and and he does have some pretty horrible problems. But the proof is in the reality of what he's doing, and that is he's going to work, and he's working enough to put him quadruple over the limit, not just over the limit. Over the limit, and I guess he felt that telling the judge, if I tell the judge how bad it is, he'll look past that. Well, the judge cannot ignore the rules or ignore the law. I'm not going to call them rules. I'm going to call them what they are. It's the law.
Yeah.
Again, at possibly a future podcast, we can talk about the 5 steps of sequential evaluation, which is those are the laws that Social Security has to go by. There's 5 steps. Are you disabled? The first step is, are you gainfully employed? If you answer yes, you don't get to step 2.
That's it.
And then step 2 starts talking about impairments. Basically, do you have a severe impairment? And if the answer is no, then they don't go to step 3. And then step 3, 4, and 5 are a little bit different, a little bit more detailed. But step 1, the very first measure that Social Security at any level, I'm beating up on judges right now, but at any level, if you just applied and they find that you're working, you're making over the limit, the case may not make it out of the Social Security office that you filed in.
Yeah.
Or we filed online, and you get a letter. We see that you have earnings of da 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 da. We've run a query, and it shows it da 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 da.
Yep.
And
And that's also the first question that it asks on our forms. That's pretty much the first question that I ask clients or leads when I'm talking to them to review their case. That's step 1 of the process. And it makes sense that I can see where the clients are coming from, where they're kind of mixing things together to where the medical part, the idea with the medical part is that I am disabled, but I need to prove that. So it's opinionated, and we need to use this evidence, and we need to actually work on it. And that's the whole reason you hire a representative, is because it's kind of a gray area, and we need to show Social Security this thing. We're trying to prove this. And then they kind of mix in the earnings part and all the other technical stuff too. And so it becomes this broad case of, we have to convince Social Security that the medical stuff, but then we also have to convince Social Security that my earnings are justified, and I haven't actually worked and paid taxes, but we have to also convince Social Security that that's okay. But really, it's category 1 is the technical stuff. There's no convincing.
Right.
It's not opinionated. There's nothing a representative can make an argument on, which is for SSDI. You're not working, you paid your taxes.
And I've said it before, the math don't lie.
Exactly.
I cannot argue that $42,000 a year is not $42,000 a year. It just is.
Yeah. Just like you can't argue that, my client has never paid into Social Security taxes, but they should still be eligible for Social Security disability.
Yeah.
That's
you
can't argue that.
Yeah, it's a hard argument too.
Yeah.
And going back a little bit, I basically said it's human nature, but I think that the representative community has to bear some of the blame. You and I have talked about this many, many times. There are several firms out there that they advertise on TikTok or wherever, Facebook, or just all places online, maybe even their own website. Have you been told you can't work and draw disability? That's an old wives' tale, and that's a headline, and it's it's clickbait.
Sure.
I want to click that because I'm working, but I got some problem with my shoulder. Maybe I can get me some disability too.
Yep.
Or the claimant has been through some other kind of disability. Let's say they went through VA disability. Well, VA disability is a percentage. If you have a rating, let's say you have, a big one is tinnitus. You have ringing in your ears. If you're in the military and you were exposed to gunfire and cannons and, mortars and stuff, you might have ringing in your ears, but you also have this knee disorder that happened to you while you were, deployed somewhere. It's service connected, and boom, you get a rating. You got a 30% or a 40% rating. Okay, so there you go. Does it matter how much you're making? Nope, not at all. I have this short-term disability, this STD, which is short-term disability and not something else. I have this short-term disability policy, says that if I can't work this, that it makes up for it, and they do a rating. I've got this workers' comp claim, and they found out that I've lost use of my non-dominant arm, even though this is my dominant arm, but I've lost use of it. They're giving me a 20% workers' comp payment, and they're giving me medical coverage, on my left arm until Jesus comes, forever. Okay, well, those are all valid, and that is the way those things work. And then you get to Social Security, and guess what? You're disabled or you're not. That's it.
Yeah, no rating.
That's it. You're 100% disabled or you're 0% disabled. And people are expecting, well, I should be able to work a little bit and draw disability. Well, maybe you can, but you can't be over the limit. You can't be working gainfully, substantially and gainfully. And so there, lots of misinformation out there.
Yep.
They might have been through something else that were completely different, workers' comp, disability insurance policy, VA, they might be through all that kind of stuff, and it's completely different, and therefore they expect Social Security to be the same way. Well, they'll give me consideration for the percentage of problems that I'm having. Going back to the left arm, I've lost complete use of it. Okay, maybe it's 25%. They'll give me that consideration. No, they won't. No, Social Security can't do that. That's not the way it is. You're 0% disabled, or 100%. You either are.
Yep.
Or you're not.
And it's disability as it pertains to your ability to work too.
Sure.
That's what I've told clients before, is because you might have a disability referring to some other kind of disability, and maybe you're receiving benefits, maybe you're not. But Social Security disability, it's not the same definition. Social Security disability, it's actually referring to your ability to work. That's the whole point of the program.
Right. I don't think I've given this example. When I worked for disability many, many moons ago, we had a person on staff, charming lady. She was really good on vocational issues, on job issues. Not a paraplegic. She'd lost use of 3 of her limbs, so triplegic. She had lost use of 3 of her limbs.
Wow.
So she was listings level disabled. Okay, now listings level is for your cancer cases, for your stroke where you didn't pop out of it, for the worst of the worst. If you meet a listing in Social Security disability, you're not only disabled, you're really, really, it's horrible. And she met a listing. Was she disabled though? No, she was working full time.
Yeah.
Literally the day that she stopped working, she could apply for disability, and she'd have got it like that. That's rare, but hopefully that helps you understand that she had massive limitations.
Yeah.
And she was not disabled under the law until she stopped working. And then she was.
Right.
And I don't, when I left, she was still working. So, I don't know whatever happened to her, but she was charming. But that hopefully that just illustrates it to folks. They'll never get to even looking at your medical conditions if you're over the earnings limit.
Yeah. And just to specify, because it might seem like we're coming on pretty harsh about this kind of stuff, the reason that you become frustrated in hearings when you find out about earnings, the reason is not because there's earnings. The reason is because your client
Didn't tell me.
didn't tell you about them, or they actually did lie to you, where the case manager called the client, hey, are you working? And they just flat out said no, and just flat out lied. That's when it's a problem.
Yeah.
If you're working, or if you try to go back to work, or maybe your work history in the past couple of years, it's actually a little bit different than what is on paper on your Social Security case. That's all right if you let us know about it and we can correct it. It is a problem when you lie to us, though.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And our hands are tied. And again, this is for any of you folks who have strong ethics. This is not for you folks who would even dare to pull one over on us. But in the representative community, and this is for non-attorneys and attorneys alike, we are forbidden. It's just against tenet number 1. We are forbidden to do damage to our clients. So in those instances where I withdraw, I never tell Social Security why I'm dumping the case, and it's usually drug or alcohol use that we beg people up front, please tell us about it. If you tell us about it, we can probably find out if it's going to be disqualifying or if it's going to be hard to argue. And then, I haven't drank in 10 years. I had a problem about 10 years ago, but I haven't had a problem. And the first medical record you get, it's like, client, or patient, drinks a fifth of vodka a day. Are you drinking a fifth of vodka a day? Well, yeah. Why didn't you tell me about that? Well, I didn't want you to drop my case. Well, you failed because I'm dropping your case. Sorry. Yeah. You lied to me. That's bad enough. But you're drinking a fifth of vodka a day, that's a pretty good indicator of why you couldn't work. So I'll drop the case. But I can't tell the Social Security Administration, my client is an alcoholic and they're drinking a fifth of vodka a day, and that's why I'm dropping the case. Because now what you've done is you've damaged that case. It's in the case record, and I would never do that. Mm-hmm. I might say, if it's an earnings issue, I might say we're not comfortable with the earnings that are reported, because the earnings are going to be reported to Social Security, and that's how usually we find out about it. But I can't do damage to your case, but I will jump out of there if you lie to me. Just think about that. If it's a partnership, really. You and I are going to go against Social Security. You and I, we're little Davids. Social Security is Goliath. And Social Security has a ton of resources, and they have a ton of time because they don't care about time. They'll take 2 years on your case. They don't care. Social Security has a lot of people who, if they misapply the law, don't apply the law, thumb their nose at the law, the penalties that they'll get for that are nothing. They're never penalized. I've never heard of somebody being even reprimanded for writing a decision that was absolutely garbage. Doesn't happen. We're little bitty Davids, and Social Security is Goliath, and we are, banding together, and we're going to fight this Goliath. I need you to tell me the truth, and some of the truth might be painful for you to say, or some of the truth might even be disqualifying. But we're not together anymore if you're lying to me.
Yeah.
I can't help you if you're going to lie to me. If you're going to lie to me, let's say the Social Security finds out that you lied to me. How do you think they're going to feel about what you do to them? If you lied to me and I'm on your side, that's the lie that you'd tell them. They're the bad guys.
Right.
If you'd lie to your own rep, you'd absolutely lie to Social Security, and therefore your credibility crashes and burns. Gone.
Yeah. I think the misinformation with the whole working part, like you were saying with the clickbaiting thumbnails, you can still work and receive benefits. The clickbait is completely fine if the person clicks on it and then it actually does specify. And maybe someone calls them and teaches them about SGA, and they tell them that, hey, you can work, but only part-time, only if you're making this much. This is how they look at it and everything.
Right.
That's the problem, is they don't. The
Yeah.
problem is it's clickbait, and then it's no specificity whatsoever.
Yeah, one of the ones that I see recently, you could be drawing $4,100 a month. Okay, I've been doing this for 34 years, had the practice for 21 years. Never, ever, zero, never seen somebody who's drawing $4,000 a month. You have
Yeah.
to be like, somebody who made 150 grand a year, maybe more than that.
I think it's more than that, yeah.
Yeah, and let's just be honest, people that made that kind of money, if they made it for several years, they've got a nest egg, and even if they become disabled, they've got something else to fall back on.
Yeah.
I've gotten really high earners who've applied for disability, and I've helped them, and they do get a tremendous amount of money a month compared to my normal clients, which $1,500 is usually the typical payout for an SSDI client of mine. And that will help you pay your bills and stuff like that, especially if you live modestly or live in not a ridiculously high taxes and high income state. But yeah, I can get $4,000 a month.
Yeah.
Well,
And again, I don't have a problem with that if you click on that and then you speak to someone and then they make it very clear how the benefit amount is calculated. It's based on your earnings. The average is like $1,500 to $1,600. You're not going to get $4,000 unless you made a significant amount of money. If you go over the details, I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
But I've spoken to so many clients who've spoken to other representatives, and with the earnings, the way they say it is, well, I thought I'm not allowed to make above $1,600 per month. That's how they say it. Well, I talked to someone else and they said that I can work. I'm just not allowed to make over $1,600 per month. What do you mean you're not allowed to make? Is that the only reason you're not making over $1,600? Is because you think you're not allowed to? That's the opposite of how the program is supposed to work.
Yeah.
But they spoke to someone with a different representative firm or some kind of other marketing company, and they told them, yeah, you're allowed to work. You're just not allowed to make over $1,620. So make sure your income is $1,619, and then we can help you out.
Yeah.
And they don't go over the details at all.
Yeah, and stepping back from the whole process and looking at that kind of, if you're a client and you're looking for representation and you want to step into that kind of relationship and they're telling you, well, this is the law, but this is how you skirt it. You can get right up against it, but you can't go over. But this is how you kind of stick it to the man. You can get by. Is that really the representative you want to have?
Yeah.
I mean, that relationship, by the way, is hanging by a thread.
Yep.
Because the minute that they offered me some overtime and it's time and a half, and
Yeah.
and your representative finds out about it. What are you doing? You've gone over the limit. Da, 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 da. I told you not to go over the limit. By the way, if Social Security finds out their representatives are telling them, you can work to this much, can't go over that. Good luck to that representative maintaining their practice.
Yeah.
Because that's not something Social Security is going to be really pleased with. That's why we don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we said in the prior podcast, I don't even like my case managers or my receptionists telling people what the limit is. If you want to go find it on your own, you find out what the limit is. But I'm not going to tell you what the limit is, because now you might misconstrue that to mean that I'm telling you can go up to that limit.
Yep.
So let me say here in front of God and everybody, I'm not telling anybody to go, just under the limit. If I'm you, I'm working as much as I possibly can, and if I can make $5,000 a month, I'm making $5,000 a month. If I can work on Saturdays, if my body will let me get time and a half, I'm working time and a half. That's the right attitude that you should have. It shouldn't be, how can I get this disability? If I can just not work much? You know, are you really going to tell your boss, hey, listen, you know, I know you want me to work 30 hours, but if I work 30 hours, I go over the limit. So if you can keep me at 25 hours, that's where I need to be. Well, I'm a boss. I probably would fire you.
Yeah.
You know, I think you're just, you know, you're gaming the system, and, you know, those are the people that give it a really bad rap. And it's actually a pretty good program, been around for a long, long time. Lots of studies have gone into the amount of fraud in Social Security disability, and it's insignificant, statistically insignificant. I think it's like 4% of fraud, and with a program that is impacting millions upon millions of people, to have that small of a fraud footprint is amazing.
Yeah.
But it's people like that who are even giving it that small footprint. Don't be that person. Don't do that. It's a good program. It helps millions and millions of people. You know, don't mess it up by trying to game it.
Yeah, and I just try to be crystal clear with even the wording, because I'll talk to a client about SGA and how that whole thing works, and then they'll say something like, okay, and so I'm not allowed to make over 1,600. It's like, okay, hold on. So let's go back. If you were able to make over 1,600, then you should do that. If you were not able to make over 1,600, that's the difference. Not are you allowed to, it's are you able to make more than that?
Yeah.
You're trying to work best you can. If you're not able to make more than, I'm saying 1,600, whatever it is, 1,620, whatever SGA is. If you're not able to make over that, that's when you qualify. Has nothing to do with you being allowed. And that's on the extreme. You know, it's one thing if a marketing company or a law firm just says you can work and then they don't really go into the details. That's one thing. It's another thing if they say that, yeah, you're just not allowed to make over 1,600 per month. And then a few of them will literally say, don't work more than this. And that's it. It's if you have a representative that's telling you, yeah, hey, make sure what is it, $13 an hour? Yeah, okay. So make sure you're not working over this many hours per week. That's a huge red flag.
That's right.
That person should not be a representative.
Yeah, don't walk away from that person. Run away from that person. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're out there. I mean, they're bad actors in every aspect or every place in American society. But don't be one of them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be one of them. So I won't play that game.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's everything I wanted to bring up. I knew that you had a couple of those bad hearings, so I wanted you to talk about it a little bit. Because it seems like that's got to be the worst feeling when you go through 2 years of this, 2 years, 18 months, whatever it is, you're at the hearing, and then it turns out that it was all for nothing. It turns out that the client never actually had a chance of qualifying, even if they're terminally ill, even if they have the best medical case that you've ever seen, and it's easy to win, to figure out, oh, okay, so we're just wasting our time. We should have never gotten to this point. That's the worst feeling.
Yes, it is.
All right, well, we'll stop it there.
Okay.
Before you go.
Before I cry.
Yeah, before you cry.